this is going to be a very important discussion. I should preface by saying a big thank you to Canadian Women in Sport and Sport Canada for providing this space and this platform for us to have these discussions, and also to feature BIPOC voices and experiences. You know, we're still asking for these things, and we're looking at other panels and looking at other spaces that we support, and we don't always see the representation there. So I want to thank Canadian Women's Sport and Sport Canada for taking leadership to provide this platform and partnering with me on We Are Sport. We're in for a great discussion. Vanessa, thanks for the intro. I'm gonna head right into the bios, because I'm hoping that based on what Vanessa told you, you know a little bit more about She's for Sports. If you wanna get to know us a little better and understand some of the initiatives that we put forth, check out our website, shesforsports.com. So we are here to talk about diversity and leadership, and we have a great panel, as I noted. First up, I will introduce Kim Davis. Kim Davis currently serves as Senior Executive Vice President, Social Impact and Growth and Legislative Affairs at the National Hockey League, the premier professional ice hockey league in the world. In this capacity, Kim leads a role supporting NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman to attract, develop, and retain fans with a specific focus on multicultural audiences through culture, youth participation, and social impact initiatives. Kim has been recognized by Hockey News 2020 Top 100 Most Influential Leaders in Sport, Essence Magazine's Woke 2019 Change Agents, Adweek's 30 Most Powerful Women in Sports, a lot of receipts that she has, a lot of accolades, and even she was profiled by First Lady Michelle Obama in Essence Magazine's 28 Most Influential Black Women in America. Next, we have Shireen Ahmed. Shireen is a writer, public speaker, mentor, and award-winning sports activist who focuses on Muslim women and the intersections of racism and misogyny in sports. And she's also a graduate student. Her work has been featured and discussed in various media outlets, and her expertise is sought by major television and radio networks, and She's for Sports. She's part of the Burn It All Down feminist sports podcast team, the first feminist sports podcast that analyzes sports culture from an intersectional feminist lens. When she isn't watching soccer, she drinks coffee as a tool of resistance. And she's one of the 2019 TEDx Toronto speakers and is currently working on her first book. Renee Hess. Renee Hess is an adjunct professor, community organizer, freelance pop culture writer, and the founder and executive director of Black Girl Hockey Club. And if you aren't following them, get on Twitter or Instagram and follow them and see what they're up to. Black Girl Hockey Club is an organization that works to build an inclusive space for Black women in hockey. With a master's degree in literature, Renee believes in the power of education and uses hockey to discuss topics like discrimination, the wage gap, sports fandom, and Black community. Meghan McPeak. Meghan McPeak grew up playing the game of basketball and decided to take her talents to the sidelines. After graduating from the radio broadcasting program at Humber College in Toronto, Meghan shattered barriers, becoming the first and only play-by-play broadcaster in the NBA G League for the Raptors 905, and the first female play-by-play broadcaster in 30 years to call an NBA game. She's also the play-by-play broadcaster for the WNBA's Washington Mystics and Capital City Go-Go, a team in the NBA G League and affiliate of the Washington Wizards. So that rounds out our panel. I'm going to get right into the discussion. We all know it's been you know, a hard time for all of us. If you're a human being watching what's happening in the news, watching the rampant racism, the police brutality, specifically against Black men, you just can't believe you're watching it. It's hard to make sense of it. So I really want to start off with asking, how are each of you guys doing? Kim, I'll start with you.
Well, this has been a bittersweet time for me. On Sunday, my daughter gave birth to my first grandson.
Oh, congratulations!
Congratulations!
Thank you. That was quite a moment. But it was also a moment where I thought about the world that he's being born into. I'm also the mother of a 28-year-old son who lives in the UK, who's a PhD student in the UK, and he just went back to Manchester on Monday. And just looking at the two bookends of my newly born grandson and my 28-year-old son, who is, you know, in the midst of what's happening as it relates to Black lives, and of course my fear as a mother every day of the life that he has to continue to deal with, obviously informs my position with the league, but more importantly, my position and the intersections of my position as a Black woman. And it's stressful. It's full of anxiety. I have to say that I've probably experienced more anxiety over the past 6 months than ever in my life. This is not a new journey for me. I've been on this road for the past 40 years, but it feels very different. And the recent incidents in Wisconsin are just unbelievable to me. You know, on the heels of George Floyd, and to think that we would face this 45 days later is, I just don't know what I'm feeling right now as it relates to that. So a lot of emotions.
Meghan, I'll ask you as well.
It's hard to put words to that question, if I'm being frank. And I apologize to everybody. I'm going to try and get through this without. I'm in the epicenter in the United States, and I can't vote in this country. I can only try to impart wisdom on a generation to take control of this vote. And if you don't like what's happening now, you need to get out and vote. First, you need to register if you are not registered, and then get out and vote. I understand we are in a pandemic. I am willing in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area to rent a van to drive people if they need to go to vote. I'm trying to do what I can as a Canadian on a work visa in a country that does not care about people who look like me. And if you don't like what's happening, you have to change who's in office. And if we don't take this opportunity, there will be 4 more years of this. And that is scary to think that a couple of months ago, a man died by the knee of an officer. And to Kim's point, 45, key number there is 45. Think about the number of the person who occupies the White House right now. Days later, a man is shot 7 times in his back in front of 3 of his children. They will experience trauma for the rest of their lives that I hope no one ever has to do. And I could have easily been Breonna Taylor. And my brother, thankfully he's in Canada, but he could have easily been Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, or Jacob Blake. And I understand people say, well, you know, they've got this warrant and that warrant. None of that, whatever crimes they did or did not commit, does not warrant a death sentence at the hands of those that are employed to serve and protect the communities. I am hurting. I am filled with anxiety, much like Kim is. I imagine Shireen and Renee are the same, but I can't speak for them. I am angry. I am terrified for my life and my friends' lives on a daily basis, because at this point, it's now, what do I have to do to get myself home safely? And Breonna Taylor is evidence that we're not even safe in our own homes anymore.
Thank you for sharing that, Meghan. Shireen, I want to segue a little bit to the impact that athletes and sports organizations have to show leadership when it comes to advocacy and activism. You know, why is it so important that we're seeing athletes say, you know what, it's not about the money, it's not about the fame, I have to use my platform?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm here as a non-Black person of color to hold space for everybody else. I mean, it's high time that people like myself and other racialized groups start shouldering some of this burden. And, you know, our Black community are exhausted, and we hear this. And that's the first thing that we have to do, is start listening to what they're saying. I know what it's like to be a Black woman. I do know that my community suffers from white supremacy, and other athletes as well. And that's the root of this. White supremacy is truly a root. And whether it's homophobia, whether it's sexism or misogyny, they're all not very far from anti-Blackness. And all forms of oppression are rooted in this truly horrid thing that does affect people. And to say to that, I think the other thing is important that organizations and athletes maybe previously may not have felt they had the language. I mean, I can't speak to everyone's experience, but a lot of people point to 68 and say Dr. John Carlos and Tommy Smith had their fists up, but there was Wyoming Attias, there was Althea Gibson, there's, Serena Williams more recently that have been doing this work. So it's not as if athletes had not, like Abdul Rahim Mahmoud was blacklisted from the NBA for, protest. There is a history, and I always do this, and I'll segue to this, and I'm responsible because I'm part of the media. The way that media tells these stories have been very limited. So there is a history there. So find your sports sociologists and sports historia friends. Hello, Dr. Amir Rose Davis, my beloved co-host. She talks about this all the time. Find these people. They know these stories. So I think this knowledge that's being imparted on athletes is also emboldening and empowering their voices. And it's incredible, to watch Fred VanVleet of the Toronto Raptors yesterday talk in a presser, what should be a very engaging, illuminating time. And even this morning online, there's some, hockey players talking some nonsense that they're Canadian and they're not going to vote, but blah, 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 they're going to support Donald Trump. And what ends up happening is there's athletes who are sharing really amazing, colorful, intentional, yet surprising truths. And I think what happens is the rest of the world is like, oh, you're speaking this. Oh, you're speaking this truth to power. But this is stuff that has existed in athletes, be they Black, be they Indigenous, be they gay. They have been experiencing this trauma. And unfortunately for Black communities, sometimes they've been holding that burden silently. And it's exhausting. I can't imagine what it's like to be a Black athlete, whether you're in the Wubble. Because, we all know the WNBA has been doing this work for a long time. And yes, I sound repetitive, but this work has been shouldered by Black women for time immemorial. And I will keep saying that. Black women hockey players have been doing the same thing. They carry a lot of this work. So to be that athlete, to be working, doing that work, which is emotionally and psychologically taxing, and then be performing at a high athletic feat is, that's unbelievable to me. I have no idea what that would be like. But what I do know is that a role in media organizations to support these voices, to say, we will hold space for you. We will give you this platform. We will let you feel what you need to feel. We will let you, honestly, this is a struggle about existence. This is not a political struggle. This is literally about life and death. And you have to literally hold that space, hold people up, but first and foremost, listen to them and let them lead those conversations, what they need.
Thank you, Shireen. Renee, I'll get you in on that conversation as well too, and maybe talk a little bit about, why you launched Black Girl Hockey Club and how are you working with sports leagues to, try to change the culture of hockey and make it more inclusive.
Well, to speak on a little bit of what Shireen was saying, I, in the last 3 months, I've really not had any media presence. I took a step back. I didn't want to put myself out there when I didn't know what was going to come out of my mouth. Because I, like you, Megan, am angry. I'm angry. I'm exhausted. Like Shireen said, I'm tired. I'm anxious. Like Kim was stating, all of those things are in myself and other Black women that I'm talking to, other women of color, and it's scary to have to sit back and watch this kind of play out around us in the United States and all across the world. I'm currently teaching a class right now, a sports media, issues in sports media, it's called. And I'm teaching out of a book called The Game Is Not a Game by Robert Scoop Jackson. And the second book that we're reading is called A People's History of Sports in the United States. And it takes a social issue slant to the history of sports, talking, before the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock until current events up to now. And one thing that I'm anxious to amplify in my class is this idea that when you have a part in sports, whether you are a fan, whether you are an executive, whether you are an athlete, or part of the media, you have power. You have immediately a sense of this ability to use your platform, whether you're an athlete and you feel the need to speak out against, police violence, or you are a media person and you feel the need to amplify Black voices, or in my case, whether you are a fan of a sport and you feel the need to gather community for others who do not have a space in that sport. That was the entire reason I started Black Girl Hockey Club back in 2018, was to be able to gather a community together, to build a network and to strengthen one another. And, now 2 years later, it's more than just a fan club. It is a space where we are able to amplify voices. We are able to have an impact on the hockey community because we're stronger together, right? That's just how it works. And not only that, but we can uplift one another when the world seems to be beating us down, when we are being marginalized at every turn. It's a wonderful it's a wonderful thing to know that I have my sisters and my brothers in the Black Girl Hockey Club to lean on for whatever it is that comes up in our in this crazy timeline that we're in right now. 2020 has been it's just
no word.
Yeah, there's no words.
There's
2020
no word.
has been a roller coaster of emotion for all of us. But I think that one good thing to come out of it for me has been the community of the Black Girl Hockey Club and the initiative within that community to facilitate social change. And that is because there are people from all walks of life that are looking for that community within the white space that is ice hockey. And so that's one thing that I'm excited about, is the ability to gather enough voices together to scream loud enough to be heard. Because, historically, Black folks have been completely locked out of the conversation in terms of, ice hockey specifically. And so I think that the fact that we are beginning to have our voices heard and beginning to gather the community together in order to focus on initiatives of social change, I think that is going to be impactful, and I have hope for that. Of course, I vacillate between that hopefulness and the complete hopelessness when we continue to see the blind spots that these white athletes in hockey have for people of color and Black and Indigenous people. It's frustrating and it's tiresome, and it makes some of us want to turn away from the sport completely. But that's why I keep pushing with Black Girl Hockey Club to make sure that those folks who are feeling marginalized know that at least there's this space. There's this space for us, and we're going to continue to push because we love it. And we should definitely criticize and try to make better something that we love and appreciate, whether it's a sport or our country. So it's just like 2020. I'm a roller coaster of emotion as well.
Kim, I'll get you in on this conversation. We do see the NFL, the NBA, MLB, there is a lens now on organizations as to the action piece. what are we doing about racism? What are we doing about inclusion? I know hockey does get more critique because we see it. I mean, Renee and Shireen mentioned a few things that are happening or things that have been ongoing with some hockey players, I should say, and how they feel about racism and what's happening with the injustices that Black men are facing. In the news, we see it every day. For those who, obviously, you sit at the seat at a very high level in the front office. For those of us who don't know some of the action that's being taken to address this, some of the initiatives that you're working on, can you give us a behind the scenes view as to what's actually happening with the NHL and what initiatives are they putting forth or planning to invest in to change the culture?
Yeah, first let me say that it makes sense and we should be interrogated. We are a predominantly white sport, and so it's not surprising that we should be looked at with under a microscope. And we know and have said that we must do better and we will do better. So I think that is part of the journey. And I talk about this as a journey, not an event, because it is something that has to take time. But time is not on our side, as we know, and as we've seen with the recent episodes of this week and the last couple of months. We've been working on this journey for the time that I've been there and even beyond. But the real work is education. And I think Shireen said that, and I think Meghan said that. And that's not the sexy work, that's the hard work. And it requires interrogation at every single level of the organization and understanding where the blind spots are. One of the things that Gary and I have spent a lot of time talking about is once you educate people, then there is no excuse for them to adhere to what you say your principles are. And if they don't, then there has to be swift action. And so that really has been the way we thought about this work. It's easy to put Black Lives Matter up and to have an opening event, and you have all of the marketing trappings of supporting a movement. But what really matters is how are people changing their belief systems on a day-to-day basis? How are people understanding what the sport is going to stand for? How many season ticket holders are we willing to lose because we stand for something that is different than what we've articulated in the past? And these are the conversations that we're having. And this is the training that we're doing with our clubs. And what I can say, which is encouraging to me, is that I'm not having to force feed this down clubs' throats. People are coming to me saying, we need help. We need your support in understanding how to deal with these issues. And for me, there are three categories. There's the combative and the unwilling to consider different points of views. And those people you probably aren't going to be able to do anything with. But there are people that are willing to listen even though their points of view might be different. And then there are people that are willing to suspend judgment and really be listeners and learners. And I think those last two categories are the areas of focus that we are trying to spend our time with. And I would have to tell you that I think that represents about 80% of the population. We have to be willing to lose some fans to gain some new ones. And I love what Javier Gutierrez, who is the new president of the Coyotes, says. He talks about our fans in waiting. And I think we have to put more credence on the fact that if we are going to stand for something, then we have to be willing to look to those fans in waiting, the fans that Renee talks about all the time, that really represent the future of our sport. And that's really where we're focused now. So it's not necessarily the sexy work, but I can tell you it's the deep work that's going on behind the scenes and in front of the scene that is going to make this sport better. And we're committed to making it better, and it's going to happen.
Meghan, I want to get you in on this because on the other side of things, fans and people who are following sports can really see the difference in what the culture stands for in the NBA. I know you're obviously covering the WNBA season. Can you talk about that culture and why the NBA and the WNBA seem to be leading sort of the charge when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to just standing up for what's right and using their own personal platforms, whether it's the athletes, and look at Nick Nurse, you know, we know where he stands. Can you talk a little bit about the culture?
The simple answer is the fact that you have two leagues that are both primarily 70% or higher Black athletes. And coaching staffs also look like myself and the players. And when you have a group of athletes that are willing to sacrifice money, fans, respect as an athlete, because at the end of the day, when they take those uniforms and jerseys off, they are still Black men and women walking the streets and driving the streets of the United States of America and Canada, because let's be real, there's racism brewing in Canada the same way there is in the US. My favorite saying is the fact that I like to say Canadians are racist, we're just sneakier about it. We're better at hiding it than Americans are. And, you know, to your question to Shireen and Renee, why is it on the athletes and the coaches to be the ones to stand up for change? Why are we putting it on them? Fans want to look at athletes as if they are not humans, as if they are robots, that they are supposed to go out and play a game and entertain us. But when the jersey comes off, or even when the jersey is on, because you see with the NBA, they have sayings on the back of their jerseys right now. The entire league in the WNBA all have the name Breonna Taylor on the back of their jersey. Consistently, the WNBA players every day, every game, recognize a new woman, Black woman, who has experienced racial injustice at the hands of law enforcement. Why is it that when things are going well, we celebrate athletes, but when things are going negatively, like they are right now in society, we don't want them to do anything or say anything. We want them to shut up and dribble. Guess what? Sports and athletes can no longer stick to sports. It is no longer a time to shut up and dribble, because as I said, when the game is done and the buzzer goes off, they take the uniforms off and they get in their cars and they can be pulled over and have a gun drawn on them the same way any other Black American or Canadian male or female can. They are still human. And I think that is where the disconnect is for fans of sports. They forget and have a tendency to forget that athletes are humans. They feel the same way we feel and they hurt the same way we hurt. And I think that was evident yesterday with the words of Fred VanVleet, Jaylen Brown, Norman Powell, and then last night, Doc Rivers spoke so eloquently, but with power and conviction in nearly 3 minutes in an answer as to what is happening in America. And while I support whatever decision the athletes make with regards to the Celtics and the Raptors tomorrow with their game, I support them no matter what. But why is it on the athletes? Why are we not forcing the politicians and the change makers and the lawmakers and those that actually have the power in society to make change, so that the crowd that loves to cheer all lives matter, it actually makes sense and becomes all lives matter? Because until Black lives matter, all lives do not matter.
Shireen, I'm going to talk to you about a key thing that Meghan said about power. You know, who holds the power, who's making decisions. We recently saw that the National Women's Soccer League has a new team. I believe it's in LA, and most of the funders or the investors were women. So is that sort of the power shift that we need to be going to, where women are owning these leagues and able to be at the seat at the table where, you know, those decisions are made that they can have an input in?
Absolutely. I think that we talk a lot about athlete activism because it's a very cool topic. It's a very like in the moment topic, but at the end of the day, power and privilege rises to the top. And there is work being done on the periphery, which is very, very important. Like Renee's and Fatou Sadio and all the amazing people at Black Girl Hockey League created Black Girl Hockey Club, not as part of the NHL. They created that community on their own. And I think this is a very important thing. And when there is criticism of the NHL, and Kim, to be really honest, I've been very public in my criticism of the lack of strong language used by teams or the organization as a whole. It's because of the people sitting at those tables. And in my work, I've always found that people who are the decision makers, unless they are impacted personally by this type of anti-Blackness or oppression, things won't change, because why should they have to care to you? And the same goes for homophobia or xenophobia or Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, all of it, which is why at those head tables, who is sitting there? Who is making those decisions? It's not enough for me. There's not enough Black women sitting on executive committees of major federations in sports around the world. I mean, look at the NFL, the owners of those teams. Like, there's one person, man of color, who is not Black, who owns a team. So like, let's look at the number of the athletes. Like Megan already told us what the numbers of people who are actually the athletes, and rising numbers of coaches. Like, there's not enough Black women coaches for my liking anywhere. But I'm saying that, so let's look to who is making the decisions. Is the language strong enough? I'm not interested in, let's all fight for equality. I don't want that. I want you to literally say, let's fight anti-Blackness. I want it couldn't be more clear. If we're putting all this stress on the athletes to do this work, let's support them. And the easiest way is to use strong language. And I'm a scribe, I'm a journalist. Words are very important, but they're impactful. I'm not gonna let people get away with doing like what? The basic? I'm sorry, it's people who are, who can be considered allies, and I'm even starting to wonder what that word means anymore. But what can people do to support? What can they do? Or where are you sitting? What table are you at? Who are you calling in? Who is becoming really, truly uncomfortable? Are we uncomfortable? Because I'm sorry, anti-Blackness and racism and white supremacy will not be dismantled unless people start shifting in their seats and get uncomfortable. I mean, like I said, we can't just look to Doc Rivers to always say this. Sure, Greg Popovich has been saying for a while, Steve Kerr's been talking about it. Where's everybody else? Where's every other coach in the NBA? Where's every other coach in the NHL? Like, I'm hearing murmurings of maybe Brendan Shanahan is at these conversations. Where is the league coming out and saying to players that are becoming and don't get me wrong, the United States, yes, the Second Amendment, all this stuff, all this freedom of expression, I get it. But at the end of the day, we're not valuing lives. I would love, Logan Couture's nonsense today on Twitter. I would love, whether regardless, and I just want to make this point before I continue on that and those shenanigans, is that racism doesn't stop at the border. I echo everything Megan said. White supremacy doesn't stop at the border. It exists in huge patches in Canada, and I'm sick and tired of people pretending. And I'm sorry, Sidney Crosby got out there saying I'm not American, it's not political, let's go to the White House. I'm sorry. And I know, Renee, you're a huge fan and I love you so much, but I'm gonna talk about this. That wasn't good enough for me. You either anti-Black or you're not. It is that simple for me.
On
either
that,
your actions, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, on that note, we know that we've got a community group of people who are French speaking watching. So we want to make sure we get a question in there, a French question to you, Shireen. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and I'll tell everybody obviously in English, how can non-BIPOC allies, so BIPOC for anybody watching, it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So how can non-BIPOC allies in sport better support anti-Black racism work? So hold on. Comment nos alliés blancs dans le sport pouvant-ils appuyer la lutte contre le racisme anti-noir?
Merci pour ça, Ainka. En premier, il faut que je réponde à ça pour dire que les alliés, ce qu'ils peuvent faire, écouter les gens, écouter les communautés qui sont noires, écouter les femmes noires qui font beaucoup de ce travail. Et après ça, c'est pas seulement écouter, il faut faire quelque chose. Il faut faire quelque chose. Nous sommes partis d'un mouvement maintenant. Et ce qu'ils peuvent faire, c'est de contribuer de l'argent. Et puis, contribuer de l'argent, amplifier sur les médias sociaux. Ils peuvent aussi, si vous êtes un obstacle dans un mouvement, il faut comment on dit, move out of the way. Donnez-nous de l'argent and literally give us the money, get out of the way. Il faut supporter les organisations des femmes qui font ça, qui font le travail. Il y a déjà des personnes, des communautés de gens qui font le travail déjà. Il ne faut pas réinventer tout ça. Il faut ajouter puis amplifier. Et ça fait même aussi avec des communautés noires, avec des communautés qui sont, LGBTIQ, musulmanes, que ce soit disabled aussi, qui sont tout partis qui souffrent dans l'oppression.
I could tell you were passionate in English and passionate in French. I agree. People have to get out of the way and let those who are in the BIPOC community do the work, but work with us and listen to us when we say there are things that are wrong, and donate, as you said, money, do social media. It's a holistic view, but they do have to get out of the way, and let others move in to help do the work.
And just to say, someone in the chat translated that, and je vous pardonne, je suis désolée pour mon français, c'est un peu pire des fois. J'ai pas pratiqué, ça fait quelques semaines, mais somebody translated, ça dit, donnez-nous de l'argent et tassez-vous. Merci Fanny Smith pour traduire.
So they're on it right away. Renee, I want to get you in on this chat. We talked about activism, we talked about using your voice, we talked about anti-Black racism, and Kim touched a little bit on growing the game. So can you talk to me about how you're working with the NHL to grow the game for girls and Black girls and Black women in hockey?
Well, Black Girl Hockey Club isn't just working with the NHL. Like Shireen said, we're an independent organization and we just want to, have a place in hockey. Recently, Black Girl Hockey Club transitioned to a nonprofit organization, and we are excited to launch an advocacy campaign in the upcoming weeks that focuses on specific initiatives that will help diversify hockey. But more importantly, we want to make sure that we're holding hockey accountable, that we are calling out issues as we see them, and that we are doing the work. As Kim said, education is key. And I, as an educator, I grew up in a family of educators. My mother, my grandmother, my sister, all educators, and myself included. I work in higher ed. And I think it's so incredibly important to put that information out there because, as Kim was saying, with that information, there's really no excuse after that, for an obtuse sort of look at the situations that are going on across the country and across the border, as Megan and Shireen both said. Anti-racism isn't a rhetorical issue. We have to address xenophobia. We have to address the criminal justice system and police brutality. We have to address the financial disparities and the hiring disparities in hockey before we can even begin to facilitate a change. And so that's what my goal is with the organization. It's not just a fan club that goes to hockey games and screams for our favorite player, our favorite team. I want to hold the sport accountable, and that's what we're doing. Whether it's with the National Hockey League or with Hockey Canada or USA Hockey or the numerous youth leagues across the country, we want to hold the sport accountable so that young Black girls and young BIPOC players can enjoy the sport just like everybody else.
And quickly tell us about your scholarship program.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. We just launched a Black Girl Hockey Club scholarship program, and we actually gave out our very first scholarship to a young hockey player in Ontario, Canada, named Talia Rose Tamboro. She's a goalie, and it was just kind of happenstance, that we came across her and her application. She's an amazing young player, and the fact that we can help lift some of that financial burden for Talia Rose and her mom, Michelle. It's just one way that Black Girl Hockey Club is attempting to facilitate that change and to, address those financial barriers that come with hockey that a lot of people maybe don't even realize disproportionately affect the Black community. When we're talking about, I could go into the location of hockey rinks and how difficult it is for folks in the Black community to get to hockey rinks. I was recently, well, it feels recently because I haven't been anywhere since, but I was in Pittsburgh in January and talking to some of the players, the grown players there, saying that although the Penguins ice rink is very close, a mile away from the Black community there are no ice hockey rinks that are available for the youth players to play within a reasonable distance. They're outside of the city. And so the youth that are, perhaps could find interest in the sport because there's a rink only a mile away, they will not have a chance to play if they don't have transportation or they don't have a way to get to the ice hockey rink that they can play at, which is like 26 miles away. So, thinking about all the different ways that BIPOC folks are affected by white supremacy in hockey, it's deeper than just, racist comments or ignorant comments on the ice or in the stands. It is insidious. It goes, it veins itself through all the different aspects of hockey, whether it's financial, whether it is, social, or, stuff like location and redlining and stuff like that. It's a very deep issue, and, sports are a reflection of our society, and what is happening in our society is reflected in the sports that we love. And if we as fans, Megan, you were talking about fans having these expectations of athletes, but honestly, as a fan, maybe I'm unique, but I have more expectations of the executives and the front office and the people in power, because ultimately the athletes are doing a job for, a whole bunch of, like you were saying, white coaches, white executives, and white owners that limit what power that they have. And it's so impressive to me to see folks in the WNBA and in the NBA standing up for their individual rights and their rights as a community, because we're not, we see very, very little of that in ice hockey. And so it's every time, I see the WNBA players coming out with a shirt that has a slogan like the one you're wearing today, it's impressive to me that, there is a group of sports players out there that are standing their ground and that are speaking their mind, and they're doing it without fear of, what the leadership or, the executives in power are going to do or say, because they have these values that they are, espousing, and they are standing up for them regardless of the repercussions. So, I think that something like the Black Girl Hockey Club scholarship is a great gateway to allow young Black girls access to hockey. But ultimately, we're just a small little organization. We can only give away so much money. We want to put pressure on the larger organizations to do the same, do more, go ahead and emulate, copy, do whatever you got to do. Like Shireen was saying, I don't speak French, but I got the gist of when she was saying, get out of the way, right? Throw money at it, whatever you got to do, get out of the way and let us do the work. I'm happy to start the conversation, but we can't do it alone. We need help.
Kim, I know we're running out of time here because we got to get to our Q&A, but I really wanted to ask you about the importance of building a pipeline of qualified people of color who want to work in sports, pro leagues, or for the NHL. We did interview Kendall Tyson, VP of Strategy and Analytics. I did an interview with her last week, and she was talking about just, how she got into her career, mentorship. Obviously, she played sports growing up, that helped as well, but it was also her connections and the people that she knew in the hockey community. So can you talk a little bit about what the NHL is doing to maybe build that pipeline so we can see BIPOC, people who are in leadership positions like yourself or are coaching?
Yeah, Renee is right. Leadership starts at the top. And in order for us to really change the culture of the sport, we have to have more representation at every level. And that is a long-term game that we have to make shorter. You know, we started this summer a program with the NHL Coaching Association. People always ask the question, should we have something like the Rooney Rule that the NFL has in hockey? And I'm like, we don't even have a pipeline to choose from. We have to create a pipeline in order to have a Rooney Rule, right? And by the way, it hasn't worked in the NFL, so I'm not sure that's the solution. But what I would say is this summer, because of a lot of conversations we've had with the Coaching Association, they put together a development program specifically focused on building a pipeline of Black coaches. They said they couldn't find any. We found 20 for them across the network of Canada and the US. And now those folks have gone through this development program, and they are now in the pipeline so that they can start doing apprenticeships in the clubs and building the relationships that so many have, which when there is an opening, who do we go to? We go to our networks. We go to the people that we know. And so how do we build a stronger BPOC network within hockey so that they know that qualified candidates are out there? And why do we have to use the word qualified when we talk about people of color? Of course,
talented. Yep.
Just how about talent? And how about this concept? How about the concept that talented people want to work in places where they see other talented people of color? And so just in the 2.5 years that I've been at the league, I've hired 4 talented people of color, not because I was looking for people of color, but I was looking for talent. They found me. They found me because they wanted to work for someone who looked like them. And so I talk about that all the time to our clubs. If you want to attract and hire more talented people of color, put some people of color in senior roles who are talented, and they will come. Okay, look at Javier Gutierrez in Arizona now, and what's going to happen in Arizona as a result of both having an owner who is Hispanic and now a president. So we have to look at this holistically. And I also want to say that we want to have our white allies be part of this solution. But as Shireen said, we need to make sure that we're all clear about what the definition of allyship is. Allyship means that you have to have a stake in it, and you're willing to put some skin in the game and to lose something to gain something. That's what allyship, not sitting on the side and saying I support it, but you're willing to put some skin in the game so that you're willing to lose something. And that's what we have to talk about. And that's what I try to talk about. And I don't expect that I can do this alone, but there are a whole lot of people out there, like all these women that are on this call and others that I see sending notes in, that are all about changing the sport. And I know it's going to happen, but we have to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. But for sure, this is a movement, not a moment in the sport of hockey.
Well, with that, I'm going to leave that on Kim's note. You know, I saw, Megan, I saw you clapping. And I know, I want to mention very quickly, I know it was last month that Tori Miller was hired. She's the first woman to be general manager in the history of the NBA G League. I know you, for the Atlanta Hawks G League affiliate team, I know you were the first play-by-play announcer, and you were also a trailblazer. So, you know, I am hopeful that we are going to start seeing more and more women in these leadership positions. Did you want to add a little thing to, I saw you clapping when Kim was talking.
I mean, preach, Preacher Kim, like Preacher Davis, like keep on, like she's correct on all fronts. At the end of the day, if you want to be an ally, like she said, you have to be willing to stand for something, or we will fall for everything. Like, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to lose to make a change? If you're not willing to lose anything or everything, then move aside and let somebody else in who is, because I don't want you as an ally, because you're not going to help.
Well, I'm going to move aside now so we can get some of those questions in. I got some questions last night from Instagram, and I'm going to ask one on Instagram, and then I'm going to go to my colleague, Vanessa, who's going to look at some questions on the chat. So I'll take this one from Nadia Flam, CBC Sports. What can we do to ensure focus on representation doesn't get forgotten after 2020? So if one of you can answer that quickly, then I can open up the floor on our chat. Who wants to take that? Shireen?
Sure. Hi. If we're talking about media, who's in the media rooms? I mean, if you have a room full of diverse people, like disabled, gay community, BIPOC, they're going to tell the stories from all over the place. If you got a bunch of like cis white men that are able-bodied telling these stories, that's a problem. So let's look at who the storytellers are. This is all connected to the same thing. And sports media doesn't get a pass on white supremacy. They don't get a pass on upholding these systems of oppression. So find out who's in your newsrooms, demand from your broadcasters who's telling this. I mean, there's been a huge push in 2020 for hiring like more diverse and racially diverse folks. Let's keep it going. It shouldn't end after 2020. This should be the standard.
I agree. So Vanessa, I'll open up to you in the back end to ask a few of the questions that we're getting from the chat.
Thank you.
I think we have time for 2 questions, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say there are tons of really awesome questions in the chat, and I knew we were not going to be able to get to all of them. So I flagged a few because some of them overlap a bit. But this one's a little bit long, but I will launch into it now. When it comes to planning social impact projects relating to BIPOC or integrating social justice into the daily operations in general, what does the discussion look like from your perspective, work environments? From your experience, does it require convincing through sport research to prove that it will be beneficial to the organization, or a qualified and experienced BIPOC person to speak on the topic, or something else?
Kim, do you want to answer that quickly?
Yeah.
It was a long question, but I think you got the gist of it.
I would say 18 months ago, 15 months ago, I felt like anytime we were having a conversation about any intersections that we're speaking about now, I always felt like I needed to have evidence and data to back it up. I have to say the past 6 months has been very different. I think that we have moved beyond the evidence and data. Not that there aren't people that still want it and need it, but I think we're now at a point where people are wanting to be educated on how to have the conversation. I find that many of the leaders in the clubs that I deal with are well-intentioned. They just are ignorant to these issues. And ignorance, the definition of ignorance is unknowing, right? They are unknowing. They have had no exposure. They have had no relationships, and they are uncomfortable having the conversation. And as Shireen said earlier, until you are comfortable with the uncomfortable, we aren't going to make progress. And so we've really been pushing these conversations and asking the clubs to allow me to be in conversations where we can have an uncomfortable conversation, because that's where the breakthroughs are happening. I would say 1/3 of our clubs are ready and are willing, and we've had these uncomfortable conversations. 1/3 are ready to dip their toe in the water of that, and then 1/3 probably just aren't there yet. But I don't know how you're going to continue to make money in our sport. And I'm not talking about next year. I'm talking about 15 years from now, 20 years from now. If you aren't preparing for the future today, we aren't going to grow the sport. We aren't going to make money. And I think everyone who is a leader in this sport gets hockey-related revenues, right? At the end of the day, they understand that language. And that's the lens in which we try to talk about this. And I think we're seeing it.
Vanessa, is there another question? Thanks, Kim.
Thank you for that. So another question I'm going to go to, in your opinion, how can fans best support BIPOC athletes and encourage leagues and teams to be vocal about systemic racism and police violence and encourage them to take action?
I'll get Megan to answer that quickly, and then I'll also get Renee to add on to that, because I could see you both smiling.
Oh, well, if only we had Russell Westbrook on the line to talk about racist fans. That's, I think, a big one, is if you're at an event and you hear fans saying inappropriate things, you know, as cliche as it is, if you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. If you're uncomfortable saying something, then one, you could be part of the problem. unknowingly. 2, find someone who will take care of the problem. You know, usher, security, say something. Try to, you know, if you're with friends, get them in on it so it's not you versus that person or that fan, so that there's a collective group calling out the racism that is being spewed at athletes. Because yes, we saw the incident with Russell Westbrook multiple times. Donovan Mitchell has even said, and he plays for Utah, and has said, Utah fans are bad. We saw a minority owner with the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals push and shove Kyle Lowry. The rest of the ownership moves swiftly on that. If you see something, say something. If you don't feel comfortable standing up and saying something, find someone who can do something. Because if we don't call it out and we don't stop it in its tracks, it will not stop ever.
Just to add really quickly on that, the only president I recognize is Masai Ujiri, and he actually went through this entire thing. So just exactly to Megan's point, even the highest echelons and accomplished people, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he was absolutely faced with the most egregious, on one of the most beautiful nights in his professional life, he had to face this type of anti-Blackness. And that's what it was. Like, where's the leadership now?
Renee, I'll get you in. Sorry, I have to switch to Renee quickly because I think we've got like 1 minute and then we've got to wrap up because I also want to be mindful of everyone's time. So do you want to add to that conversation?
All I would say is if you're looking to be a true ally or accomplice or whatever you want to call it, that you, even outside of the arena and outside of the stands, you've got to amplify Black voices. You've got to listen to Black voices. You've got to ask the hard questions of your non-Black peers. You've got to, use your voice as a non-Black person and get your white friends to hop on that wagon, and you guys work together to help the communities that are in need. And last but not least, throw money at the problem if you don't know what else to do. Because, putting Black Lives Matter in your bio or posting a Black square a couple weeks ago or listening and learning at this point is not enough. You've got to do more. And we expect that not just from our athletes, but from the executives, from the fans, from everyone involved, because not only do those of us involved in sports have power, but we also have a responsibility. We can't just ignore the things that are going on around our world because sports is an escape. Because like Megan was saying, athletes are individuals, they're people. And once they take off their uniforms, we're still Black folks. We're still marginalized folks. We're still facing the same everyday problems that folks like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Jacob Blake are facing. So you can't just pretend anymore. It's time to put up or shut up.
Well, thank you guys on that note for this wonderful, very important conversation. Kim, thank you. Shireen, Megan, and Renee. I know all of you guys are online, and I know for Kim, the NHL has their diversity and inclusion content that's out there. And I know that Megan, you're doing a lot of different things with the WNBA, and people can follow you on, commenting on the NBA itself. So follow all of these wonderful women, hear what they're all about, join the conversation. We know this was a conversation that, if we had more time, we'd still be talking. So if you want, use the hashtag #WeAreSportCA and keep on talking. That's where we have to start, conversations and then action. Thank you, Canadian Women in Sport. And we're going to be doing some more Zoom and Instagram Live discussions until the end of September. So this is a series that started in July. Launched by She's for Sports in partnership with Canadian Women's Sport and Sport Canada. And I'm going to be telling these stories until the end of September, and then we're going to figure out how else we can continue to amplify the voices of those who are from the BIPOC community. So thanks for tuning in. The recording will be posted, or you can check the live stream on Facebook, but we'll also be publishing a packaged recording content in a couple of days. So thanks a lot, guys, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ainka.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.